Welcome to the Being Known podcast with my friend, Dr. Curt Thompson.
And with my friend, Pepper Sweeney, the most beautiful man in the world.
Where we discover and explore what it means to be truly known.
Right, right on. Like what's happening right here.
Exactly.
Right here, right now, folks.
Exactly. So in this season 3 of the Being Known podcast, we are going through Curt Thompson's new book, The Soul of Desire, Discovering the Neuroscience of Longing, Beauty, and Community. We are today beginning chapter 3 in the book, which is going to be on beauty and becoming what we create, and which would make me a 15-foot aluminum 1957 Crestliner boat right now, because I guess the beauty that I'm trying to create is to restore this thing that for years sat underneath this cabin that someone had given it to my dad, and he was gonna do this thing for 30, 40 years. This was going to be a project he was going to do. And my brother-in-law and I hauled it out from under there and took it out to his farm. And we've been spending some spare time trying to bring it back to life. It's going to be a long process, but we're first sanding off the paint that was on there to begin with, and that's a tedious and tough job. And but it's a very cool old boat in that it's a dual hull, and we'll have a little windshield for it and steering wheel and that whole thing. And it's just a really, for me, going out there and being able to work on it and knowing, where I want it to go and looking at images of what this could possibly be, has been a great exercise for me. And it's been a lot of fun.
I don't know if we'll, at some point, we'll be able to do this, but I would love, you sent me a picture of the work that you were doing.
Yeah.
On the boat turned upside down, right. You're doing the sanding work.
Right.
And I'd love for the rest of us here to have a chance to see that, because I think I love this story. It's not just any old boat. It's the boat that, that has connection to your dad. And in so many respects, like your vision for what it can become, and at the same time sitting with what it is not unlike the thing that we're talking about today. I mean, like it is such a powerful metaphor and exact expression of this notion that part of what God is doing in the new creation is not just calling us to, we have this longing, as we've been talking about, to create, to see and to notice and to create beauty in our world, without our yet quite being conscious of the fact that what God is doing at the same time is, he's working on us who are the Crestliners. And he's saying, while you do your work of new creation through me, I'm doing my work of new creation in you, so that what you're producing, whenever you're producing, is always going to be a reflection of what I'm producing in you, that you're becoming the very beauty that you're longing to create. And so I would love at some point, if we can get it up here on our, on our film footage, to find a way. Maybe we could at some point, offer that photograph. And it's just a beautiful story. When we talk about this notion about beauty, I'm reminded we begin with this, where we often begin here in our conversations, when we begin at the beginning, so to speak, this notion of what happens in Genesis chapter 1. And when we read the text, we see that right out of the gate, there's the acknowledgement that the world was chaotic. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void. And, I think about so much of my life that can be punctuated by moments of that chaos. I'd like to believe that the world is one in which order is the order of the day. And yet, if you have enough 9th or 10th grade science courses underneath your belt and you read about thermodynamics and you read about this notion of entropy, or that you walk into your teenager's bedroom and you say, like, here is physics on display in my son's bedroom. That if I'm not actively putting energy into the system, whatever the system is, whether it's my body, whether it's my work as a physician, as a producer, and as an actor, if it's as a homemaker, as like whatever these things are that I'm doing, if I'm not putting energy into this, chaos reigns. And we see that it's an expression of what it's like to be in the world, that the world, when left alone, in many respects, in the beginning was chaotic, and God steps in and God begins to create. And he's not just a creator, he's an artist. He's working to create these things. And we see in the larger text that he doesn't just do this randomly. He doesn't just say, let the world be the world. He doesn't just say, there is this order of things. Like they didn't, the Hebrews, when they were coming up with these stories, when they were, writing these down and telling these to each other over the years, they could have just said, God made the world and here it is. But we see this sense of beauty, first of all, in the sense that there's an order, that the Spirit of God sweeps over the deep. What the NRSV says, it sweeps over the deep. And I think about all of us who are listening, and we think about the parts of our lives that feel deep, where chaos is reigning, and we're longing for the Spirit to sweep over it. We think about our marriages, we think about our work lives, we think about COVID, we think about our kids' lives, we think about our friends, we think about losing friends, not just to COVID, but to cancer and all the things. And there's a lot of places of depth that I'm longing for the Spirit of God to sweep and to bring order out of chaos. But then when we read further, we see that God is not just an artist randomly. He's not just throwing paint anywhere that it happens to be, but there's day one, and there's light and darkness, and there's day two, and there is the water above and the water below, and day three, and the air birds and the water fish, and then the lights of the day and the lights of the evening, and so forth. And we start to see a couple of things. We see, first of all, that there is this rhythm of interlocking play between two things, light and darkness, air, water above, water below, birds of the air, fish of the sea, the lights of the night, the lights of the day, this sense that looks an awful lot like these complementary parts, different, but complementary to each other. And God is bringing these things together. And not only that, but each of the days has this interlocking complementarianism with all the other days. Like we have all these days that are now interlocking with each other in this grand kind of puzzle, if you will, that's being put together, an interlocking puzzle of smaller interlocking parts that in some respects feels a lot like integration. This integration that we talked about last season, this notion that we are differentiated and we are linked persons. And what's so striking to me about this is that it's like they're these interlocking parts, like it's not like they all have clear boundaries, right? Like the daytime and the nighttime, like one bleeds into the other, but it's not like, well, we turn the light switch on and off. It's more like a dimmer switch. And like males and females, we have lots and lots and lots of things that are in common. Where we are different, we're extraordinarily different, but we have lots of things in common. And so the differences are not so stark, but we're different enough that, and I'm similar enough that I'd like to think that you should be exactly like me. But when the differences show up, I'm like, oh, no, as it turns out, we're really not. And we serve very different purposes. And it's really interesting because this isn't all that different from what a newborn experiences. A newborn comes into the world, into what for them feels pretty chaotic. I was fine, and then I came into the world into harsh light, into cold air. Now I know that I'm wet. And now I know that I'm hungry. I know that I'm uncomfortable. Things are chaotic. And immediately, caretakers who receive this little girl or this little boy into the world are now sweeping over its deep. And we are bringing order out of chaos. We clean them up. We wrap them up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got a picture yesterday of my mom, who is a great grandmother now.
Oh my
And for the
gosh. How
second
about that?
time, my mom will be 90 next month, and she won't be mad at me for saying that. It's not something that she tries to hide anymore. And anyway, so I have a picture of her that I got yesterday of her. She just had, my niece just had her, or my nephew and his wife just had their second child,
Mm.
maybe last week. And there's my mother holding this little baby. And it's just a gorgeous picture. But one of the things that stood out to me after I looked at it for a while is just how tightly that little baby is swaddled,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
how, because of the chaos of the world,
Mm.
and that when they're in the womb, they're so bundled up and safe, and then
Right.
they come out,
Right.
and so they've swaddled this baby so that the baby then feels some of the chaos diminishing,
Right.
right? Yeah.
What a powerful picture you just painted. I mean, that's such that whole sense of like, one of the things that we often recommend in therapy, you and not just for therapy, but you may be familiar with like weighted blankets.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've ever like lain under, like I get under a weighted blanket, and not only can I actually not get up from underneath it because it's hard to move the thing, but I don't want to.
Right.
I just want to just lay there.
Yep.
And allow it to hold me.
Mm-hmm.
We are, we're really good at like offering things that appear to be hugs in our culture. And, I got to tell you, it's a beautiful thing to do this with you. But when I do this with you, I only know how much I long to be in the room with you. And to be in an embrace with you that wouldn't last for just 1 second, wouldn't last for the cursory, polite gesture that's just, a little more than a handshake. And I know in our culture, the whole notion of physical intimacy is now in a real kind of difficult stage because there's been so much trauma and there's been so much misuse of physical intimacy in so many different ways and in unspeakable ways. But it doesn't deny the fact that when we are held, in fact, if you all have ever been held by someone in a way that is comfortable, that in a way that is not intrusive, in a way that is not consumptive, but in a way that is genuine, just like that newborn is being swaddled. I remember I was at a retreat that I had been invited to help with a number of other people help facilitate this retreat. In the course of the retreat, I'd kind of had some of my own stuff revealed, and in the course of that time had asked for some prayer with some of these guys. And one of these guys, my friend Michael Cusick, I'll never forget. I'm in the middle of being very much like a mess, being very much feeling like this infant. And I remember that he embraced me, and I'm like, okay. I'm pretty good at this. Like, I hug people and they're like, okay, I think we're done now, Curt, after 1,000, 1,000. I'm like, I'm still like holding you. And you're like, and when you're doing this, when you're doing this genuinely, you people are caught by surprise, and they're like, and they just don't want to let go. It's like, I'm not sure, but oh yes, I think that's a good idea. No, I'm not actually. Yeah. Oh yes, let's do it. Because we are so infrequently held. And I mean, Michael Cusick held me probably for 90 seconds. And he wouldn't let go. And I'm thinking, my own father's never held me like that long when he was alive. And that's not to blame my dad, but I mean, like, to be held in such a way that the very core of my body, that my right brain was sensing and imaging and feeling things, that whole sense of seeing, soothe, safe, secure was being transmitted to the core of my brainstem. And it all begins with being swaddled out of the chaos, right? Out of this chaos in which we're communicating to this infant that we see you. We're here to soothe you so that you can be safe. We want you to know that, like, we are with you. And this is the first indication that this is really true. And this is what God was doing in the world. That God himself is an artist, and that beauty is emerging by first creating a context in which we can actually do the artwork. Right? You can't paint Mona Lisa in a hurricane. It'd be tough to do that.
Right.
It'd be tough for you to work on your boat in a snowstorm, right? In northern Kentucky. God is creating space of safety for the world in the way that that newborn in your family is being given safety by being swaddled. And we would say then that you're preparing it for the integration process that is about to take place for it, in the same way that God was doing it, these interlocking parts of each day, and each day's interlocking with all the other 6 days. And, one of the first things that we want to say is that, we've said earlier that beauty can easily be identified in places where it's easy to identify it. You walk into a museum and you expect to see it because it's all been arranged. But as we will talk about even more so later in greater detail, you don't anticipate beauty to emerge out of something that is chaotic. Most people who would walk by, if they were to walk by, was it your brother-in-law where your boat is? Yeah. If they were to just like drive by or walk by and they just see like, man, that's just a piece of junk sitting up there, whatever that's like, I got words that come to my mind to describe like that kind of thing. And like, because that's not what they think. But if they were to happen upon this with you, or you and your brother-in-law working on it, they're like, oh, hey, what's going on here? Right? It's because you see something in the very space where beauty does not immediately jump off the page. The Spirit of the Lord sees the world as chaotic and sees beauty on the backside of what it's doing. And so from the beginning, we are getting a hint of Easter. There was no more chaotic a day in the world's history than Good Friday. And yet evil didn't see coming what God saw coming 3 days later. And that infant comes into the world in your family. And by the time it gets out, it doesn't see anything but the chaos. And I imagine all of us who are listening, we think about the number of different places and ways in which, when we imagine the chaos in our lives, beauty is not what we imagine. We don't imagine that we are going to become beauty in the course of this. But it's an example too, Pepper, of how we like to say that there's no greater form of the creation of beauty, not only that we are making, but that we become when we then repair ruptures, because so many of our ruptures, the chaos that God first saw, now, like, I become an agent of that chaos, unfortunately. I'd like to believe that my life would be this interlocking group of interlocking sections of things, and integration is taking place. There's differentiation and there's linkage. And I'm not just being able to create with the people that I love, my wife, my kids, my friends, but also that I can do it with my enemies. And like, that's not me. I am like a rupture waiting to happen every single day. Dr. Desire, Mr. Rupture. That's what we can call me, right? is my form of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dr. Desire, Mr. Rupture.
Oh gosh.
And I know that I know we were talking earlier that just this whole notion of how beauty emerges in the course of repairing ruptures. And I know that you had a story that you want to tell.
Yeah. So I don't know how many of you all that are listening. I don't know how many of you are watching the series Ted Lasso. I can't say enough about this show. I just think it's absolutely fantastic, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone if they haven't been watching it. But I was watching just last night, and there was a scene that I actually stopped after it was over, and I went back to watch it again because I thought it was so beautiful. And I think it's an example of this as repairing ruptures, the beauty of repairing ruptures. So without giving away too much, there are a couple of characters. The main character in the show is a soccer coach in Europe, and he was hired by a woman that owns the soccer field or the soccer team. But the reason why she hired him, he was an American football coach, but the reason why she hired him to coach soccer was because she got this team in a divorce with her husband, and it's his passion, this team, and she just wants to destroy it, basically. So unbeknownst to him, Ted Lasso goes to England to coach this team, and he's being put in this position to fail, and he doesn't know this. And he is nothing but a complete gem to everybody around him. There's lessons of vulnerability, of curiosity, of belonging, of all these things in every episode. It's gorgeous. You should watch it. But so she has been sabotaging him every step of the way, trying to see to it that he fails, trading away his best players, trying to get the paparazzi to get bad pictures of him, all these different things. And he doesn't know it. And he considers her a good friend. And she's kind of trapped into having to come clean to him. So she goes to his office, and he's sitting behind the desk, and she confesses all these terrible things that she's done. And she says, and she says, I've done all these things to get back at my ex-husband. And, I've sabotaged you every step of the way, and you don't deserve this. And if you want to quit and go to the press and tell them what I did, I'm good with that. And he takes a minute, and you don't know what he's going to do. And he's got this look on his face. It hurts, right? He just found out that somebody he cares about has been hurting him. And he gets up, and he walks over to her, and he says, I forgive you. And she gets this look on her face, and she's like, what? What? And he says, going through a divorce is hard. And it causes you to do crazy things. And I forgive you. And he puts his hand out to shake her hand. And she brushes that away and pulls him into this embrace. Not unlike the embraces that you were talking about just before, where it was just this deep, long embrace, and she's a mess, and the shot now is from behind him, seeing her face, and she's just losing it because she's never experienced this kind of, and it's so beautiful, and it's so painful at the same time, just gorgeous. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can just stop our episode right there. I think we're done now.
Right.
Need we say more? It's a powerful example of not just a scene, but a powerful example of what we see each of them becoming. Like even her receptivity to his grace, receptivity to his forgiveness. I haven't seen the show, but I can imagine the transformation that comes over, like first the startle.
Right.
And again, kind of like the newborn that is suddenly thrust into the real world with all of its harshness and chaos. She finds herself, at the mercy of the world. Right. And what does she find? But she finds, kind of like in Ted, a bit of a midwife who's welcoming her and saying, I forgive you. And we're going to wrap you up. We're to swaddle you. We're to make sure that you know that you're not alone, that you're held tightly, that you're held securely, that you're seen, soothed, safe, secure. That's such a gorgeous story. And, it takes us even further into this notion that when another way of another thing that the Genesis account tells us in Genesis chapter 1 about what's happening with about every new rendition of creativity, we read in the text that God saw that it was good. God saw that it was good. And we rightly read those texts in acknowledging that what we're reading, what the writer is telling us that God, named something. He gave purpose to something. He gave, beauty to something, and then he saw it and just noticed, oh, that's really a good thing. But, in reading Paul Borgman's treatise on Genesis as literature, you come to recognize that the writer of Genesis, the oral traditions and the writers of this account are brilliant in their writing, because in the Hebrew, the whole notion that this writer is getting at, the writer is not just getting at this notion that God made something, looked at it and said, oh, that's really good, which is part of what's going on, but it's not the only thing that's going on. The other thing that is going on, the other two things that are going on, number one, is that the Hebrew word for good can easily be translated either way as the word for good or the word for beautiful. Wow. And God then just doesn't see the light and the darkness as good, as like a good thing, but it's beautiful. God sees what he's made as beautiful. And this is also then we jump into the New Testament when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. He could easily be saying, I am the beautiful shepherd. He could easily be saying that I am so much that is good. Every tree that does not bear beautiful fruit, right? It's not beautiful for the man to be alone in Genesis chapter 2. It's not beautiful. That God just doesn't think of us as people who are good. He thinks of us as people of beauty. And this is not a word that we usually have in our minds about who we are becoming. Once again, when's the last time that anyone ever approached us and said, gosh, I see you and beauty is just coming out all over the place? Because it makes us so nervous, in the same way that an embrace makes us nervous because of all the trauma and shame that's built around it. But it doesn't stop the reality that God sees that we aren't just good, but we're good because we're beautiful. And then there's the other element of this, that this writer isn't just saying that God is looking at an object, something that he's made, and sees it as good and as beautiful. But the writer is saying that the beauty and the goodness that is emerging is happening because and as God is looking at it. It is the looking at it that the beauty emerges. God's look is the very thing that is drawing beauty forth. And so you talk about Ted Lasso, this sense that her beauty that is emerging in her receiving his forgiveness is happening because Ted is doing it. It is his looking upon her. It is his speaking to her. It is his saying, you're beautiful. Even in your chaos, even in your intention to undermine and devour me, I'm saying to you, beauty is what I see. And it undoes her. And of course, I would have my own set of defenses when Jesus would have come to me and say this. Well, beauty is all I see. I'm like, you got to get a pair of glasses, man. Like something's not right with your vision. And so we sense and see here that beauty isn't just something that exists on its own, but it is a direct function of and a result of someone looking at us. And so, we live in a world in which we worry that we're not beautiful enough, of course, right?
Yeah.
And so we're all doing everything except, you don't have to do that because you don't have that to worry about. But I mean, look, we're all okay. Like, dude, like until you and I are dead, until we're dead, like
Listen, Dr.
this, I'm
Desire.
gonna get so much mileage out of this. Okay. But we are so hell bent on I'm going to be 59 in a month and I'm still like worrying, like, am I going to be in shape? Am I going to be like physically fit? Like, and I worry about the fact that my body is failing me, but I'm responsible. Like, I have to do the work of making fitness and beauty. Like, I have and we read in the text right out of the gate that that's not how beauty emerges. Beauty emerges because somebody else is doing the looking upon us and saying, beauty is what I see. Our job is not that we have to work so hard to become it. Our job is to receive other people seeing it in us in the first place, not least in the repairs of the ruptures that we experience and can enact in our lives. It's just not really very easy for me to receive that. I have this story, Phyllis, my wife, and I, we've been married for nearly 35 years. And, I would say two things. Anything that's good about my life has at least the fingerprints of my parents on it. And I would say further that anything that's good about my life, there's nothing good about my life now that does not also have the fingerprints of my wife on it. And, but I don't always live as if I believe that she really loves me in the way that she claims that she does. And I remember, this is probably 3 or 4 months ago, we had one of those moments in our house we occasionally have in which I had, in marriage, you discover that there are just certain things that, you discover early in your marriage. Oh, this is a thing that bugs me about, him or her or whatever. And you think, oh, but we'll work on this and we'll work it out. And 35 years later, I'm still repeating the same thing. There are just certain things that I can say, well, Phyllis, I'm really sorry, but this is going to be what you're going to live with for the next 50 years. I wish that were different. And so one of those moments came and I did something that was really hard, legitimately for her. And when those moments happen, it's not just that when I hurt her feelings or I do something that's unhelpful. It's not just that it happens. It's that I become overwhelmed with my shame about the fact that it still happens. And so I remember we had this rupture and we tried to repair it, and she was leaving to go visit our daughter who lives in another state. And the next day, I remember this rupture happened on a Saturday. She left early the next morning on a Sunday. And I'm like, I didn't want to get out of bed. I just felt so bad about this. Later that afternoon, she and my daughter get on FaceTime. They FaceTime me. And I'm like, I don't know why she's calling me, because the whole morning I just been spent why would she want to be with me? This is 3 months ago. And I get on the FaceTime call and she's like, hey, we just wanted to see how you're doing. And I'm like, why is she being so nice to me in my head? And so I told her, I said, gosh, I'm really kind of surprised that you're calling. And she said, why? And I told her why. And of course, my daughter is hearing. And she said later, we talked about this later. And she said, if we were to have a microscope and you look in the microscopic field at the circle that you see under a microscope, and if you were to look at this part of our marriage, this part of our marriage would occupy a very, very, very small dot on the outer rim of the circumference of the microscopic field. If I look at the rest of the marriage, the rest of the marriage is so beautiful. This is a thing, and then we worked, and I know it, but it's out here on the rim, and it's a small dot that's on the rim. But she said, it's as if when this happens, you take the slide and you move the slide directly under the center where that small dot is on the circumference. You move that directly under the center of the lens, and you drop the lens onto that dot until the dot fills the microscopic field. And that's all you see. And I'm like, well, that's because all there is. That's all there is. And she's like, I think you might want to work on this, because that's not what I see. I see so much beauty in our marriage that when this happens, you don't see. And so there is this sense that if she doesn't come to find me, even in the wake of me being the perpetrator of this rupture, if she doesn't come to find me, there's going to be a problem.
Right.
And so I just want to just affirm this example that you're describing, Pepper, about Ted Lasso and how so much beauty emerges out of chaos when we are repairing ruptures, which we will get to eventually. And, we then, this notion then that beauty emerges as a function of our being seen by somebody else. It doesn't just exist on its own. And we move then quickly to Genesis chapter 2, and we see some other ways in which beauty emerges as functions of hard things. This sense that, first of all, God has to get down in the mud, right? It's not good for man to be alone. God first forms man out of the dust of the earth. It's an intimate, beauty is an intimately charged thing. Michelangelo has to get intimately connected to the marble, the paint. Like, I think about the productions that you do. I like, talk about immersed. All the production work that you do for all these different artists and the different folks that are you're producing work for. I just think, like, you talk about being chest deep in the chaos, chest deep in the mud, in order to bring forth beauty. And then you get to later in that same chapter where he says it's not good for the man to be alone. And what does he do? This is the other thing too, that beauty is often costly.
Right.
Right? Like, why doesn't God just form somebody else out of the mud and bring that person to Adam and say, here's your other? No, Adam falls asleep and then God performs surgery. And if you all have listened to it, if you all had surgery, like it's not a picnic. You think, like, if I'm going to see beauty like this emerge, like, why do I have to have a 6-inch gash in my flank? And again, we hear the echoes of what we read about in John 19, that his side was pierced, that it's in the piercing of his side that water and blood flows, and out of it comes life. And what do we have with Adam in the wake of his surgical procedure? That, by the way, he didn't ask for, he didn't agree to. There was no signed, like, consent form. God didn't ask, like, so let me just run by you what we're going to do here. Get your consent signed. Like, no. He just gets, like, really sleepy. He gives him some really great wine, and then suddenly, like, he's out. The next thing you know, he wakes up 6 hours later and there's a gaping wound that has to be healed. God seals it up, this painful wound. And what emerges? God brings the woman to him. And here's the other thing too. Who knows how long? My friend Kristen Terry, who we spoke about in the last series when we advertised, when we promoted her artistic work in the connection blocks,
right?
She said, she made this beautiful observation. Who knows how long God and the woman have spent together before he brings her to Adam? Maybe getting her ready for this, to do the work of what it means to be the object of beauty, to be the one who, when Adam now sees her, he acknowledges this beauty. And what poetry and song is what he bursts forth with. Right. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. He can't do anything but sing and be poetic. And one wonders, gosh, I wonder what it was like for Eve to hear those words. I wonder what it would be like for us to have anyone speak those words over us. Poetry and song, beauty in the making. And we see then that the man and the woman were naked and unashamed. This notion that they together are commissioned by God to take the next step of the creation of and becoming of beauty, both sexually and soulfully, without shame. This vulnerability that comes when we are naked, this sense that we are also going to never be without the cover of another. We think about Mary and Joseph, when Joseph had to cover Mary, her shame of being pregnant without being married. This notion of Joseph of Arimathea, when Jesus' body is naked and beaten and dead, And Joseph goes and asks Pilate for the body. He says, I'm going to cover it. And he wraps it and puts it in his own grave. Even then, Jesus' body is being cared for by somebody else who's coming to find him. This notion that we're differentiated, that we are vulnerable, that we need others to cover us, while they are also seeing our beauty come forth, such that together in our differentiated and linked selves, we in the world also bear the image of our God, who creates in the way that we've been talking about, that's recorded in this beautiful narrative in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. And it's so great to talk about the way that God talks about beauty and creates beauty and calls it forth and sees it as good and beautiful at the same time, while knowing full well that it's just a short jump to chapter 3 in Genesis, where all hell breaks loose. We'll get there soon enough, but I just want to say I'm just so grateful for you, Pepper. Like, I think about this podcast even as coming out of this space of differentiation and linkage. Amy, you, me. I won't go so far as to call it the Holy Trinity, but one is tempted. The temptation quickly passes me by, but I'm tempted. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to be able to do this with you, and such that even the thing that we're doing in this production, hopefully, at least I am watching beauty emerge. Even there's no way that, of course, any of us could do by ourselves.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And it's been a couple of weeks with other responsibilities for the three of us where we haven't been able to be together, and I feel it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I've gotten so spoiled by the rhythm of being together once a week. And it is just I like to say it's an embarrassment of riches. It just really is.
Right
and I feel like I'm learning so much from it. And then when I start to miss it, and when our time between seeing one another gets longer, sometimes I start to forget a little bit.
Yep.
What it is and what I love about it so much, and how it's impacting me. And sometimes I forget to do some of the practices that I've been putting in, and so having the opportunity for me, and I hope our listeners feel the same way. I hope having the opportunity to come together in this podcast once a week is life-giving for me. And I'm grateful to you and to Amy for allowing me to be a part of it.
Well, right back at you, bro. Right back at you.
Well, we have to end there, or it's going to be a double episode, and we can't let that happen. But there's so much more to talk about. I loved this chapter of the book. I'm loving reading it. I'm stopping myself from reading ahead. I'm trying to just prepare for each week as we go in, and thank you for going through this with us.
Yeah.
Until next
Pleasure.
time, Curt.
Till next time, man.
Love you.
Love you.
Oh my gosh. I know I say this every time, but it was so good. I thought, we could talk more about a weighted blanket, which I got one last week, which is so funny. Because I found myself I kept adding blankets. I'm like, I'm not cold. I'm like, I want the weight. So I just got a weighted blanket.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Amy, when we talked about beauty coming out of the chaos and rupture, I thought of the story of the stained glass.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. Would you be willing to tell that story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. A friend of mine and my boss and
friend of all of ours happens to
collaborator.
be
yes, a friend of all of ours for many, many years, Nicole Johnson. So I had just started working with her, and she was moving. She lived out here. She was moving her things from Nashville, I think, out to here, and her parents were driving all of her things out in a truck. And so Nicole and I were meeting them when they arrived, and to unload all of her things. And they opened the back of the truck, and it was as if gremlins had gotten in there and just chomped everything up. I mean, we all looked at it like, you couldn't do this if you tried. Like, how did this happen? And so we just tried to recover from that, but then we're unloading things, and some things survived better than others. We got the truck unloaded, and then there was this beautiful, what you had to imagine, that it was a beautiful stained glass that a friend had given her years before. And Nicole was devastated by all of this destruction. So I said, okay, I'm going to sweep out the van. And there were all these broken pieces in the truck. And I thought, I can't get rid of this. And I thought, Amy, what are you going to do with this? So I got a big hefty bag. I just swept all this stuff into the hefty bag and put it in my trunk. And we went on. And it was in my trunk for months. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to see if somebody can do anything with this. And so I went to a couple of places, a couple of artists, and they were like, no, it's unsalvageable. There's nothing we can do with these. Then one lady, I just saw it wash over her face, and she was like, I can do something with this. So she took those pieces and created a beautiful stained glass. And then I gave it to Nicole for Christmas. And honestly, when I gave it to her, I thought she might think, really? This is nothing like the first piece I got. And she opened it, and it was like, it took her a minute. And then I didn't say anything, and she knew what it was. And it was like, what is the word when you take some salvaging? It is more than salvaging. It was a new piece of art, and it was amazing. And she has it hung in her office.
Right. I'm in this story as you're telling it right now, Aim, I'm really struck by the moment as you were describing, the moment when the artist who did it saw it and said, I can do something with this. And, I just think about how there are certain parts of my story where like, there's nothing that can be done about this. Some part of, it's like some parts that you'd like to go back and say, I wish I could undo this. And, in some respects we hear Jesus say, no, the solution to this is not to go back, rewind the tape and somehow no, I'm going to take the very thing for which you cannot see. Like you can't even begin to imagine it. Because like, as you said, you took it to several artists and like their imagination could not see over the edge of the horizon. But some of
them thought it was laughable. Some of them were like, really? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And in that sense, we all have stained glasses, right? We all have those things that we sweep up and don't have a clue what to do with.
Right. And we all, and we really do literally all have them. I think the other part of your story as you told it was like, I had it in my trunk for months. And I think about the length of time that parts of our stories remain in the trunk for months. And we're driving around with them.
Weighted down with them.
And, on occasion we bring them out to an artist and can you do something with it? No. Just put it back in the trunk.
Yeah. Well, or try to get rid of it.
That's the tough thing when you're talking about the brokenness within you and if you go to someone who you perceive as an artist who's going to see the beauty in you and they say, yuck,
No.
there's nothing I can do with this.
Yeah.
The courage that then takes to then go to the next person and
Right.
say, look at this, you know, I mean, and I think, you know, when we were talking, we were talking about beauty emerges because God sees it, or beauty emerges because we see it, right, in someone else. It makes me really want to be more intentional about seeing the beauty in the people around me and acknowledging that beauty that I see in the people around me.
Yes.
Because and selfishly, I know what it feels like to have someone see the brokenness in me as beauty.
Right.
And let me just tell you, it's pretty unbelievable.
Right. Right. And I'll just say, I mean, not to be too much of whatever, but like, it's not selfish.
Right.
Right. So it's not, you're not, it's not unbelievable selfishly. It's like, that's like, bro, that's what you were made for.
Yeah.
You were made to experience unbelievable joy when someone sees the beauty and the brokenness.
Yeah.
Kind of like the trash trucks that might be coming to Amy's.
I think your taxi's
trash
there.
trucks
I think
are so consistent.
Are they trash trucks, or is that, or as Pepper just said, maybe your taxi's here.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that
someone is in front of the trash truck. I think that's what just happened. But I want to say one more thing, because and so the trash is in our trunk. The broken pieces are there. Then if one artist says no, then we take that and we put it in we take it to the dump. We try to put it further and further away, and it gets harder and harder to find for anyone else to see.
Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
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 Show someone your broken pieces, not just someone, but
yeah. And Pep, it's funny that you said, you know, what you feel about when someone comes and finds them in you. Like, I'm just noticing, even right now, you reminded Amy of the story. Right. So it's an example of what's happening right here on our recording
in
right
this
now,
moment.
Right.
of somebody coming to find, I don't need to say anymore. And so to your point of like wanting to be more attuned and mindful of calling forth beauty in other people, the whole notion of, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
The whole notion of, you know, somebody does something for us, or even somebody thanks us for something that they do. Like the whole notion of saying, gosh, I just thank you for doing that. I just want to tell you how grateful I really am for what that meant to me. Or when they thank us and you say like, can we just wait for a second? I just want to take in your gratitude, because it really, and of course they're like, you know, it's like the character, I don't know, in whatever her name is in the Ted Lasso, like, what?
Yeah.
What? You're seeing beauty in everything from an ordinary moment to a broken moment. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. This was great today. Go ahead.
No, yeah, it was. I've mentioned this series, The Chosen.
Yeah.
And
all right.
You know, in the very first episode, it was such a cool thing that like the character of Jesus, I mean, folks, if you haven't seen it, I'm not giving much away, but
I don't think there's many spoilers in.
No, because wait, what do you mean? Because
we all know how the story ends. I mean, we know this. Wait a minute. There's this movie about the gospel of Jesus. And it's about this guy named Jesus, but I don't want to ruin it for you.
Yeah. Watch the movie.
Watch the movie, because the ending's pretty awesome. That's all I'm going to say, but I don't want to spoil it for you.
I'm not going to tell you.
It's a redemptive. Oh, I shouldn't even say that.
He blew it. No, never mind. I'm not going to watch the movie now.
I'm not watching it.
Yeah, I know the end.
Why would I watch it? I'm not going to, the book's better than the movie anyway.
as you were saying, Curt.
Remember earlier in our recording when I was
Yeah,
telling
take it all
everyone
back.
how grateful I was for you, the two of you?
Yeah.
I've sometimes said here, like, there are lots of things that I don't know. And I'm having a moment of enlightenment here of what I didn't know about until about 60 seconds ago.
Mhm.
I'm
Are
sorry.
you guys no
I'm done.
way. I just want to know that you're done, because I'm not going to talk anymore, because I can start to talk and it'll just like verse 17 of this song will begin.
Yeah.
Do you need me to
Trying.
remind you what you were talking about?
No,
Okay.
no, I'm awash in my shame of the moment. I am static. I'm holed up. I'm a piece of granite, stone, immovable. I was on the way to a really creative moment, and along
And
came the
boom.
weed whacker. There I was, my little dandelion coming to flower.
Oh, my jaws are hurting today.
I know. My cheeks.
Yeah,
are
that's
hurting.
because you've been talking way too much for the last 3 minutes.
Well, you don't let me talk for the first hour.
Well, this is why. This is why I don't.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, come
Oh
on, man.
my gosh.
We got to
Okay, wrap
land this
this up.
plane.
Yeah.
I cannot
We're
recover.
struggling.
There is no recovery. There is no recovery.
Come on,
There's
The
no-
Chosen.
Well,
You
we're
can
just
do
gonna-
it.
gotta
we're just-
know.
We're
We
just gonna
gotta
sweep.
know.
We're just gonna sweep this into a trash bag and throw it in the trunk. That's what we're gonna
this
do.
is-
Not my trunk. Not my
I really
trunk.
want to
My
hear
trunk's
about The
full.
Chosen. Come on.
No, I can't
Take
do
us
it.
out.
I can't do it. Okay. All right. One last thing. It's just the moment that you don't expect, right? It's the. Have you seen it?
I've not.
Okay. Jesus has an encounter with Mary Magdalene, and of course, there in the scriptures there are no details of this other than one reference to him having delivered her from demons. And it's a bar scene, and she's kind of at the end of a rope, and the bartender pours her another one of whatever it is that they're drinking, and she reaches for it, and out of the peripheral of the screen, all you see is a hand that reaches and puts his hand on her hand, and he says, "That's not for you." This felt sense, and what's so amazing, like it's the first encounter that anybody has with the character of Jesus in the series.
Wow.
And it's this sense of like, I mean, they did it. It seems like they did a really good job of like, her life is like Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, right? And the world was chaotic and void. And the Spirit of the Lord swept over the deep. Like it's coming for the chaos. And leaving beauty in its wake.
So, Pep, we've got to watch The Chosen.
Yes.
And Curt, you watch Ted Lasso.
That's what we'll do. That's what we'll do. That's what we'll do. Yeah.
Well, thanks, you guys. This
Fabulous.
was a great day.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yes.
Appreciate you
No.
both so much.
This podcast is produced by Curt Thompson, Pepper Sweeney, and myself, Amy Chella. Audio production and editing is by Keaton Simons. Video production and editing is done by Mark Gould. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on social media at Being Known Pod. If you like this podcast, tell a friend. If you love this podcast, tell everyone you know. And please like, rate, and review wherever you listen. Be well, be now.